the view on the Hill and in the caucus?
I think the view on the Hill is generally supportive of the Prime Minister, and certainly in the caucus as well, the position that he has taken.
Can have both leadership over there and maybe in India. What does the caucus feel about that?
Well, we certainly will be looking at that issue as it's brought before the states is trying to be supportive.
So I believe you're traveling to Pakistan. What are your plans in Pakistan?
No, I'm not traveling to Pakistan. I have an event in my district, which I'm leaving for tonight at 3 a.m. I will get there in time to get back to my district, so no, I'm not able to do that. Pardon? Congressman McDermott and Bonnier, that's hard, yes.
Did you discuss any possible U.S. role in the resolution of dialogue between India and Pakistan in case of
what we discussed in general terms was the United States trying to be supportive of India. Yes.
You mentioned sanctions. Do you see hope for the eventual lifting of all sanctions?
Yes, I'm glad you brought up the point. I see the opportunity to lift sanctions. I listened carefully to Secretary of State Powell's comments during his confirmation hearing about how sanctions are so often counterproductive, how we shouldn't have sanctions. I know when he was pressed by one of the members of the Senate about sanctions, he said, well, if we have them, they certainly should have a, what you call the clause, an expiration clause, a sunset clause, it's often referred to. And when they said, well, how long should that sunset be? He said, basically, as short as possible. It is long since time, in my view, to have had sanctions lifted. We have pushed for the lifting of sanctions last year, and indeed, we've got a number of sanctions lifted, but I would like to see the new administration lift all remaining sanctions, and the United States go forward with India in a way in which we are able to have military naval exercises, for example, as we've had in the past, and a very successful Malabar naval exercise. I think the environment will be conducive toward lifting sanctions.
Sir, I'm sorry to bring you back to the same topic.
Yes, sir.
But can you please elaborate on what efforts is the Bush administration making to break peace between India and Pakistan?
Well, the administration, of course, as you know, is in the process right now of making selection of Undersecretary of State for South Asia, of a new ambassador for India. The administration is formulating policy and proceeding, but I believe that the momentum that has been developed over the last few years is significant, and the support that was given by Secretary of State Powell and the statements made by the administration about a strategic relationship with India, about India being a force for stability in South Asia. All of the indications are, in terms of what I've heard from Secretary Powell and from President Bush, they desire an engagement with India in which we recognize that India is a powerful country and recognize that it has an important role to play, and that we should cooperate and work harder and more consistently, in the words of Secretary Powell, in trying to be supportive. Those are some of my observations, but it is early in the administration. Yes, sir.
Congressman Royce, I would like to take this opportunity for the Indian press also to know what you stand about in terms of China and the whole world, and China and India and China and so forth. I think you've been a very strong supporter in that sequence also to India, so I would like to...
Well, I will comment then on the observation made by Secretary Powell which was to the question on China. I believe the language was a force for stability in Asia. China is not. In other words, that China has not been a strategic partner. And that is the view of Governor Bush, as you know, that, as he said, China is not a strategic partner, it is a strategic competitor in a sense. Now, that is not to say that we should view China as an enemy. It's certainly not to say that India should view China as an enemy. But it is, I think, to recognize that China has not been a strategic partner in the sense of helping to resolve a lot of the disputes that we would like to see resolved, and that the reality is that we need to be engaged more broadly across the entire continent. One last question. Yes, sir.
Did you discuss some specific cases in trade and investment?
Trade and investment. Let me make this observation about trade and investment. Trade between the United States and India is about $11 billion. It has grown tremendously since the reforms in the early 90s that Prime Minister Rao implemented. However, the good news is $11 billion. The sad news is that the world economy is $8 trillion in terms of commerce. And so it is still such a small fraction. And one of the observations that I would make in watching the entrepreneurial nature of Indian Americans in the state of California, going up to the Silicon Valley and seeing where 40% of the new startup businesses have an Indo-American partner, going down to what we call the Orange Triangle in Orange County, and meeting so many IT, high-tech leaders in the Indo-American community. It is clear that when the economic environment is right, there's a tremendous amount of wealth that is created by the entrepreneurial nature of the Indian people. And one of the questions I think that is interesting to ask is, in what sectors do we see the most rapid economic growth? Do we see the production of vast amounts of wealth that lead to greater and greater productivity, and thus, economists tell us, lead eventually to higher wages and to a better standard of life? It is in those sectors that have been most liberalized. And that's in the United States, that's in India. And on the President's trip here, we had an opportunity firsthand to see where the creation of an IT sector here has led to 500,000 Indians employed in an area of the economy that produces some $5 billion in revenue a year. I am one of those who have made the transition over my life from the views I had early on in my youth to where I am today in terms of my economic understanding. I now believe that trade liberalization, that markets are very productive in terms of creating wealth and creating the opportunity for citizens to have a better quality of life. I think that many people that have looked at what we were taught maybe in university versus the reality of the world have come to the conclusion that there is really something in what we're seeing happen in IT and happen in the creation of capital and wealth through a liberalized economy. And so, in terms of trade and investment, I think that it would be a win-win if the United States sat down with India, and we worked sector by sector to reduce tariffs, to encourage more investment, to encourage more trade, and do it in a way that makes sense. Maybe some tariffs are gradually reduced over 5 years in sectors where, for India's development, it needs quick, more speedy U.S. trade investment. In other areas, maybe 10 years, and in some where the reality is that there's a great deal of resistance on the U.S. side or on the Indian side, maybe it's 15. But there should be a broad blueprint, I think, put forward that would allow for more trade investment. I think also the United States should take steps to help put India more squarely on the map for U.S. trade investment. And I give the President credit for his trip here and assisting in some ways in doing that. But I think there's more that we need to do in terms of discussions with businesses in the United States about economic opportunity. 14% said they would look first to investment opportunities in India, but 56% unfortunately said that they would look first to invest in China. Now, if you look at the actual results in China, there is a respect for contract. They don't basically have the common heritage of respect for private for investment. And I think that in some ways we can raise the amount of attention that is given to this issue, and that's going to be another goal of the India Caucus.
Thank you. And this is my request, if you kindly use the story tomorrow.
Will encourage the amount of capital that's invested in the society here, and that will lead over time to the creation of more jobs, and will lead over time to higher productivity and output. So that would be my observation.
How much our administrative system is really coming in the way of that kind of thing?
I think that you probably want to get away as much as possible from the permit barrage or the licensing barrage, I think is the terminology that economists call it, to red tape. Make it easier for people to start businesses, have clear rules, and liberalize the trade.
One last thing. Apart from exporting pizzas and Pepsi, why can't in India have higher level of education?
In the state of Gujarat. Here in India, it's very impressive to see what so many different business groups are doing to adopt villages. We met with one group today that had adopted 35 impoverished villages, not only some of the hardest hit, but some of the poorest villages, in an effort to try to...
From son of the Chief Minister, son of the Working Committee member of Congress Party. He is a member of Parliament, Lok Sabha, from Mizoram. He is the president and was for Young Mizo Association. That is controlling not only the youth, the total Mizoram. He is a nominated member of Lok Sabha.
अकेले में आपको नहीं बुलाता इतना तो मैं भी अगर इतना मैं दुनियादारी तो मैं करता हूँ तो मैं ये नहीं कि अकेले आपको
How do you do, sir? My pleasure, Congressman. Nice to meet you. Where are you from in India? Oh, I see.
He was judge in Madhya Pradesh.
Yes.